Some days I feel like I can see a time when in the future no one's going to be interested in a painting or a sculpture because it doesn't move. They can't interact with it. They can't reach their hand across a Van Gogh and get him to smile or interact with it. So that would be a dark future, right? Where the only way you could experience a Van Gogh is by putting your hands all over it. I like to do things that are site-oriented, rather than, take work that I've already made and put it someplace. That's good too, but I like to really respond and be connected to the space. Grounds for Sculpture has allowed me to kind of play in a huge field of investigation and speculation and make a, kind of an experimental exhibition. We talked about the project and we talked about what we could do and how we could do it and moving things in, moving things out and all that stuff. And at some point I thought, I don't know what to do with this space. I give up. I almost gave up. I had some ideas about inflatables because I thought the only way to handle this space is to be up in the ceiling. We finally found a guy in China to do the work. I continued to develop designs and send them to him and get feedback from him about what would work and what wouldn't work, how it would feel. And so finally we came up with a whole suite of designs and we began the execution, The interaction with people is so important to me. Also in the development of ideas. Like I like to see, because it helps me understand what wavelength the piece is working on, right? To see how people respond and all that sort of thing. I'm a kind of a person, I don't want any limitations. I want it to be expansive. I just want it to get big. I want whatever I see in my brain to just happen. Let's make it work. So this was a project that kind of reined me in a little bit. It taught me about those limitations. It taught me about the limitations of, it's difficult to work with somebody that you don't speak the same language with. So we had some back and forth. We brought projects here to Grounds for Sculpture and were able to put it in. And so that was wonderful that Grounds for Sculpture was so fluid in working with me. The show is called Synthetic Cells, Site and Parasite. So site is the sort of architectural site that you see in front of you. Each of these is a contained bubble, a cube, an aggregate form, something like an architecture or a sculpture. But the idea is that, in essence, there's another show hosted within this show. But it's not hosted within the architecture of the space, it's hosted within the architecture of each individual work. And that is something that I think couldn't have taken place in another place and time. What happens with the augments is there's always an animal on the augment, an animal or an insect. So when you have the experience of the augmented reality, you see the mathematical object that is behind, but you also see the photograph, and then on top of the photograph comes the object. You say, well, what is this? This is some kind of surrealism, some kind of crazy thing out of this artist's mind or whatever. In a way, yes, it's both those things. But it also has to do with reconciling something about the appearance of things and the math of things. It's not that I have something I want to tell you straight up about math and nature, but it is that I could feel like I can only get to nature through math. I think on one level, this stuff is accessible enough and easy enough that generation that maybe not so comfortable will be able to work it. I've seen it happen. I've seen people do it, and they've kind of fascinated and they kind of fall into it. The kids look around the room, a screen, whoosh, go right to it. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. What can I do with this thing? How can I work it? Whatever. So there'll be a divide, I feel like I want to create the possibility for these younger people, give them the opportunity to experience some of the values of art, but give it through a language that they are conversant with, that they're comfortable with, that they dig. They love it. They're screen-based. They're Instagrammable. They're all this sort of stuff. I think that these works will function maybe a little bit like a generational bridge. I hope that they would do that. They would introduce one generation to something, and vice versa. this idea of broadly connecting diverse ideas together in a site is really important to this work. I have to say that the response has already been pretty strong. I've been surprised at how enthusiastic it is, and I think it's because of this thing. There's some joy and summer and light that's associated with this work. It's kind of phenomenological. It's kind of, it's experiential. It's extremely experiential. It's playful, you know? I hope that it would be as if you'd run across a flock of butterflies. And what an extraordinary feeling that would be, those light colors just flapping the wings.